Hi, and welcome to this PowerShell video. So this video is going to be not so much a programming or coding tutorial as much as it is just really how to install PowerShell 7 or 7.2 and how to use PowerShell 7 and 7.2 on your system. Because what we're using for all the previous videos has been PowerShell 5 or 5.1, which comes pre-installed on your Windows machines. And it comes with a PowerShell ISE. After PowerShell version 6, that ISE does not exist anymore. So PowerShell 6 and above do not have that ISE. So we do have to use something else. Now your choice of this is pretty open. I usually use Visual Studio Code if I'm using PowerShell 7. And also you could code a lot of other things in Visual Studio Code. I do have another video that just goes over the install of Visual Studio Code, but we'll be doing that in this video as well. And I'll also be installing the specific extension for PowerShell to make the coding life a little bit easier. So let's just start by installing PowerShell 7 on our machine. So I will be posting all these links in the description below. So right now, this is just the Microsoft documentation site, but they actually have the stable release, the long-term support release, and the preview release. So what I usually like to do is I just like to use the long-term support or the stable. You could use preview, just be aware that there might be some things that don't work properly, some commandlets that might not really work. Or you could just strictly use this one, which I believe downloads it from the long-term support branch. So let's just look at the long-term support branch, which brings you to the GitHub, and then you will have all the PowerShell downloads here since PowerShell is now supported on Linux and Mac OS. So we're just going to download it here for Windows 64-bit, and we're going to download the MSI. So let's just click on this here. So this is going to download. So we're just going to wait for that to finish, and then we're going to go through the install. So now that the install is complete here, let's just open this up. Let's just show it in folder. So here we have PowerShell 7.2.1. We're just going to go ahead and double click on it. And we are going to run. And then we're going to go through this setup. So here it's just basically telling you what we're going to be setting up, where it's going to be setting up. Now you can change this to wherever you'd like if you have a drive that you specifically install all your applications to. Now for this, for the optional actions, I always like to keep the first two checked because this will let you register the Windows events logging, and this will add the PowerShell to the path environment variable. I also like to enable PowerShell remoting. Now, of course, if you're doing this on a work computer, you might want to just double check to make sure that you would be allowed to turn this on in case they have a policy against that. And that's pretty much it. I don't really check off the other two. If you do want to check it off, it basically just adds the run with PowerShell 7 context menu for PowerShell files. So if you right click on it, you'll get the option to run with PowerShell 7. So that's just the little bit different there. So let's just go next. And then here it's just asking you if you'd like to include it in the PowerShell updates, the Microsoft updates, to automatically get the PowerShell updates. So we're just going to click on next. We're going to keep it just recommended. And we are going to do the install. This install is actually really, really quick. And we will actually see, before we install Visual Studio Code, I will just show you guys how it looks. We can minimize this while we wait. All right, so it is all done. So you can actually launch PowerShell right from here, but we're not going to check that. We're just going to hit finish. Now, if you come in the search here and search for PowerShell, and maybe my search has not actually re-indexed here. So we do have PowerShell 7, but we do still have our old PowerShell. So we still have our PowerShell ISE, and you can still code in PowerShell 5.1 or 5 if you have it. But you can also run PowerShell 7, which will just open up a window here, which should allow us to run. PowerShell 7. All right, so there it is. I'm not sure why it's not appearing in my search, but it does come up as a whole separate application with just this PowerShell 7, and that's 64-bit. And then we still have, if we go in our administrative tools, I believe, Windows PowerShell, we still have our Windows PowerShell and Windows PowerShell ISE. So if we run this one here, now I believe that the command is PS version table. So here we can see that it is version 5.1. And then if we do PS version table here, we can see 7.2.1. So we have two versions of PowerShell. You can actually still use the old one if you install PowerShell 7, but PowerShell 7 does not have an ISE. If you open up the PowerShell ISE, we will see that if we do the PS version table, it is running 5.1, and there is ways around this. You could hack the ISE to run 7.2.1, but that is not supported by Microsoft. So I will be showing you guys how to get a very similar feel to the ISE for PowerShell 7.2 or 7 or 6 as well. So the first thing we're going to want to do is open up a web browser, and we're going to want to come to code.visualstudio.com, and we're going to want to download the Visual Studio Code installer. Now this should start pretty soon. And there it is. So it does start up pretty quickly. This is a pretty small install, but it is definitely very, very handy. Like I said, there are a lot of other tools that you can use to use as an IDE for PowerShell 7. You can use the actual Visual Studio IDE instead of Visual Studio Code. I believe there's also some other like third-party Visual Studio Pros, like Visual Studio PowerShell Pro or something. There's quite a few other ones, but I just prefer sticking to Visual Studio Code. It's lightweight, not super in-depth, but it gives you all the abilities to really code in PowerShell, code in Python, JavaScript, and a bunch of other languages as well. So if you're just getting into programming, I would say Visual Studio Code is probably more than enough. So we're just going to agree the terms here. We're going to install it to the default location. We're just going to create that. And then we're just going to make sure that we register code as an editor for supported file types and add the path. So we're just going to do that. And then we're going to hit install. Now the install here is pretty quick. And then there is one more thing to do after this installs. We're going to add the extension for PowerShell. And this will basically add all the color coding that we were used to in PowerShell ISE and just make our lives a lot easier in Visual Studio Code. So let's just hit finish here. So this is going to be the first page that you get. You can select the theme. You can pick a light, dark, or high contrast, whichever one that you would like. And then you can set up a whole bunch of shortcuts. And then there's a lot of support for languages where you can browse for language extensions. So let's just go with that. Now to install an extension, you would just come into the panel on the left here and click on extensions. Now, all you have to do is search for PowerShell. And then the first one at the top here, which is developed by Microsoft, which is called just PowerShell. If you click on that, It basically says this extension provides a rich PowerShell language support for Visual Studio Code. So it lets you write and debug PowerShell scripts using the excellent IDE-like interface that Visual Studio Code provides. So this is basically going to give you a very, very similar feel to the ISE, and just provides you that ability to debug the code right in it, instead of using the console, which doesn't really let you debug code and kind of execute line by line. So let's go ahead and let's just install this extension here. And once this is installed, we are actually going to open up a script that we have already written in the past and just see how well it runs. So there is an actual PowerShell ISE theme that comes with it, which will make everything look like PowerShell ISE, which is pretty cool. If you're only using this for PowerShell, it is definitely a neat option. So we can close that. So let's open our folder here and let's go into our scripts here, which is just going to be in C scripts. And then let's look at our event viewer or CSV. I kind of want to get a GUI version here, but I'm not seeing any of the scripts on here. Give me one moment. Let me just see if I can find the code here for us. Okay, so it definitely does not seem like it is there. So let's just open up our event viewer scripts here that we've done most recently. We're just going to trust the offers. And then we are just going to use the get win event with XPath. So this is where we were using XPath to get our Windows events, which was a bad login for a specific username. So let me just go ahead and trigger some bad logins here for that computer. All right, so there we have a few here. So let's just highlight everything here and let's just run our code. So we're going to search for the username of admin. And there we are. We do get our events back. And if we run this again and we search for test, we get one bad login. So all of our scripts work. There are a few things that do change from PowerShell 5.1 to 7.1, 7, like anything over 7 and even 6, there are some changes. So going forward, I'm probably going to specify what version of PowerShell that I'm using on the video. But going forward, it will, I would say 99% probably be PowerShell 7. So make sure to download PowerShell 7 and have it set up. I would recommend just using Visual Studio Code, but definitely feel free to use any other IDE. I will be using Visual Studio Code, so if you're following along with the videos and you just want to have an easier time, Visual Studio Code is what I will be using with the PowerShell ISE theme, just to give us that familiar feel that we've been used to. So that's pretty much it for how to install PowerShell 7 and how to install and use Visual Studio Code to use PowerShell 7. So if you guys have any questions or comments, leave them down below. Like I said, I'm going to be posting the links for these downloads down in the description. You guys can check that out. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to be notified when that next video comes out. And I will see you guys on the next video.